Hi, everybody. Welcome to Dive Deep. I'm Shelby Cornett, and I'm the ministry assistant at Cambridge City Christian Church. And this is Danny, my guest.
Your perpetual guest. How was your Christmas?
Awesome.
We haven't met here in the last couple of weeks, so
Yeah, we haven't.
yeah, I've had a lot happening, days off and stuff like that with the holidays. So
Yeah. Yeah, it was good.
Yeah.
How
So
was
it's
yours?
good, yeah. Cold.
Yeah, it was really cold.
It's 2023. What's your New Year's resolution?
I don't do those.
To be nicer to me on this show, right?
I don't do New Year's resolutions.
So you're not going to promise that you're going to be nicer on the show then?
No.
That's just your way of avoiding an answer. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Do you have any New Year's resolutions?
No, I really don't do New Year's resolutions.
I
No.
don't do it because I know I probably won't follow through
Yeah.
with it.
And I don't know. I guess for me, it's kind of like, okay, just because a calendar switched dates, that's a reason for me to change.
You're still just going on with time.
Yes.
It's not, yeah.
Yeah. But, for some people, it can be helpful. So that's
Mhm.
great.
If you stick to your New Year's resolution,
Mm-hmm.
you deserve an award.
Yes. Yeah, I don't think I've ran into too many people that, if maybe not even any.
No. Have you seen like memes of the gym on like January 2nd and there's all these people and then it's like January 10th and there's nobody.
Yeah, I was driving by, where was I? I was down in Cincinnati, and we were driving by a gym, and it was crowded. And it was like, the day or so
'Cause
after
New Year's
Yeah,
resolutions.
yeah. Wonder what it looks like now. Probably pretty quiet now.
There's a bunch of like Hostess cake wrappers in the parking
In the
lot.
parking lot, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. No, not me.
I feel the pain. I really do. Yeah.
Yeah. So church stuff.
Church stuff.
We're in the Mark series.
We're in the Mark series. Yep.
And this week we did Is Your Heart in It?
Is your heart in it?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, what'd you think?
Well, I just listened to it this morning
Okay.
because I was upstairs
That's
Sunday.
right. You had to help up in children's. Yep.
But it was good.
Yeah. Anything that really stuck out at you that
There were like some little things, I
Okay.
guess. Like, okay, the story you told about the pig
Yeah.
stuck with me
Mm-hmm.
because it made a lot of sense.
So what was that story for any of our watchers or listeners?
So
that,
pretty much you can shine up a pig all you want, but its nature is still to go back to the mud.
mm-hmm.
And with us, it like the mud is our sin.
Mm-hmm.
So we can do,
We can try to put on a good show, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
but our nature
Mm-hmm.
is to go to the mud.
Yes, it is. We always keep going back to our sin, don't we? That's our
Mhm.
nature.
So I
Yep.
imagine like, I don't know how to, I say come to Jesus moments, but
Mm-hmm.
the moments when you feel like you're doing really good is like getting your bath as a pig and with your little ribbon and
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the reason this whole story came up was in the text we looked at this week in Mark 7. We were talking about Jesus' interaction with some religious leaders, with some Pharisees, who thought that outward things could make up in some ways for what was going on inside. And
that was an interesting story.
they were really big into these washings. And I shared a big, long illustration. You can watch the sermon and actually have it on the screen so you can kind of read along. But, it was this big ordeal. Like, you would have to wash your hands in a certain way, and the water couldn't, once it washed off your fingers, it couldn't come back up to those fingers. And
it's like how
was
surgeons like
sort
wash
of,
their,
yeah. Yeah, it was just really this big, long, drawn-out process. And what Jesus was pointing out in the text was that while they're doing all this fancy stuff to make themselves look like they're pure on the outside, on the inside they're hypocrites. And he used an example of how they were allowing people to do something called Corban, which Corban was like money that you would set aside for God. Well, they were letting people, in essence, like say, no, I can't use this money to support my parents because I've given it to God. So they were using God to keep from taking care of their parents.
right.
So Jesus was pointing out that, you guys might do all the outside stuff, but on the inside, what comes from the heart is what matters. And that's really the application for us from the message is that, we worry sometimes about how we look on the outside. The real question is, what is it that's coming forth from us in the way that we love people, treat other people, our relationship with God? That's really what it.
The stuff that people don't always see.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. So, so anyway, yeah, it's a really important text, and I think it's one that as Christians we need to take seriously. Now, it's really easy to think, well, I don't do that. Like, I don't put on a show on the outside. Well, but we all do in some way.
Mm-hmm.
We all have different things that maybe we attribute to people that we think makes a person look righteous.
Right.
Well, they go to church every week. Well, they must be righteous.
Mm-hmm.
Or, they give money to the church. Well, that must mean that they're righteous. Or they serve, in a class or help kids or in church or whatever. No. I mean,
Not
those
necessarily.
those can be, they can be signs of a
Mm-hmm.
vibrant faith, but they should never be the sign
Right.
of a vibrant faith. And so that's kind of what Jesus got into.
It's like the don't judge a book by its cover kind of thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, don't judge a person's faith or even your own faith
Mm-hmm.
by the things that you're doing on the outside. And this was a common problem that Jesus confronted with the Pharisees because they loved outward things.
Mm-hmm.
I know that they would go to the synagogue and put money. It was kind of like a bin you would put your money in when you go to the
Mm-hmm.
temple, like as an offering, and they'd make a big deal out of it, and and then they'd there's a story of the widow who just put in just a little teeny bit of money, and Jesus said that she put in way more than the Pharisee did because when she did it, she said, I'm a sinner, and she was contrite and humble before God.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's what God's after. I mean, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't give. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't serve or do things
Mm-hmm.
on the outside. Jesus isn't sitting here saying, well, forget all that stuff you're doing on the outside. You don't have to help people.
Right.
Just be right on the inside. Well, the fact is you can't be right on the inside if you're not doing things on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
But you can be right, right on the outside and not be right on the inside.
Right.
So that's kind of the whole gist, I think,
Mhm.
of this
It's what's
passage.
inside is more important.
Yeah. Yeah. Why are you doing what you're doing
Mm-hmm.
rather than focusing on what you're doing?
Yeah.
So, yeah. I know we've had this discussion even amongst our staff. One of the things we kind of keep track of as at our church is, are people attending worship? Are they in life groups? Are they
Mhm.
serving in ministry, serving in our community? Those are some like indices, I guess you could say, of
Mhm.
how we can measure some things. But we also know that that's not the full measure because those are outward things, and they might give you a clue, but they don't
Mhm.
give you the whole picture.
Right. And you
Um,
can't get the whole picture from the outside.
You really can't. No. And that's why we have to be really, really careful when it comes to judging, a lot of people say you shouldn't judge others. That's not biblical because you do have to judge person's character and whatnot. But one of the things that we should be very wary of, though, is saying, hey, a person isn't, they don't have a relationship with God, blah, 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 when we can't really see into their
Right.
hearts. Now, sometimes you can kind of assess that in a truthful way by their actions on the
Mhm.
outside, but a lot of times we make judgment calls based off of ignorance
Mm-hmm.
and not based off of facts.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus never said we shouldn't make judgment calls based off of facts. I mean, if that was the case, he would have never confronted the Pharisees like we saw this week in this past. If you weren't supposed to judge things on the outside, he would have never said anything to them.
Yeah.
But the problem is that the Pharisees, they thought that because of the outside, that everybody would think they had it right on the inside. And of course, Jesus had an insight that we don't have.
Mm-hmm.
He's God, so
Right.
but so he was able to judge in a different way. But yeah, we got to be really careful when it comes to that. Don't judge out of ignorance.
Right.
So, and a lot of what it's in a person's life we're ignorant about. We don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Have you seen those, like a person's life, like a timeline, and then what you know about it is very small?
Yeah.
And so we can't
Yeah.
decide that about other people.
Right. Yeah. We have to be very, very careful about
Mhm.
how we do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
One of the things I had highlighted, we kind of talked about already, that we put traditions next to the Word of God,
Mm.
like equal.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I think, do we know that these are traditions and not
Mm-hmm.
what
Yeah.
God is requiring of
So,
us.
so I didn't get into a lot of depth on this just because of time Sunday, but there are traditions. The church has made the same mistake when it comes to traditions. Now, again, I'm not trying to disparage anybody or anything, but one thing I do want to, one example I will point out is within Catholicism, there is this idea that tradition and the Bible almost have equal weight, and I don't see how that's a whole lot different than what the Pharisees were teaching, which was the very thing Jesus preached against.
Yeah.
You know, so because there's a lot of traditions that's been passed down through Catholicism, such as veneration of Mary, and you know, you have Hail Marys and the Rosary and all the. None of that's in the Bible. None of it. But what's happened is it's been elevated to where it's like an outward sign of your faith. So I guess I'm just asking my Catholic friends, like how's that any different than what the Pharisees were doing? Now that I'm done picking on them, now I'm going to pick on ourselves. So I think within the church we can do the same thing when it comes to like certain sacraments. Like for instance, I know I was raised with a Restoration Movement Christian church background. I still believe, you know, in a lot of what the Christian church teaches through the years. This idea of getting back to the original, getting back to the way the Bible or the church was when it started. I think it's a wonderful thing. But one of the mistakes I think that was made was such a heavy emphasis was placed on baptism as it being some kind of a work that we have to do in order to be saved. I think it produces some problems because it kind of smacks a little bit of what the Pharisees are doing too. Communion can even be another one.
That was my first thought.
I can remember, I don't see it so much at our church, but I know when I was younger, I remember some people who would come to church. I was a kid, and I remember seeing it thinking, that's weird. They would come to church, and because communion was in the early part of the service, they would come, take communion, and then leave. And I wondered for a long time, like, why did they do that? And it was because they felt like that's what you have to do. Like it's kind of like this act, this ritual that you have to do in order for your relationship.
So you did your work for the week,
right? So I don't need to stay in for the sermon or worship or whatever.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't see it at our. That doesn't happen at our church, but I do know of situations I've seen it myself in the past where that has happened. And so again, that's kind of an outward sign, thinking that somehow proves your faith,
right?
And the list goes on. We can, you can think, oh, I'm a great Christian because I go to church every Sunday, or I'm a great Christian
Serving,
because
giving.
I serve, give. Yeah, the list goes on, and that's Jesus would say you better be really careful with that line of thinking.
Right.
That doesn't mean you're right with God if you do something. You need to look at your heart. And so yeah, I don't know. I think that's kind of along that lines, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything?
I had one more thing.
All right, one more thing.
The point.
The point.
The point of the message was dealing with symptoms doesn't cure the disease. Don't confuse actions with solutions. Can you dumb that down for me?
So, well, let's look at the first point, right? So in the first point, we said dealing with symptoms doesn't cure the disease. So when you get a cold.
Oh, okay.
Now you remember.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you get a cold, we usually treat the symptoms, don't we? Like we'll go get some Benadryl or some Advil or something and take that to deal with, but we don't really deal with what is causing it. Even when we get sick.
The deep part.
Yeah. Yeah, like rather than go to the doctor and get an antibiotic, what do? We just deal with the fever with some medicine. That's what a lot of people do when it comes to walking with God. They're just dealing with the symptoms, and they don't deal with their heart problem, which is that we're all sinners. And really, that's what our world is doing. Our world thinks that the problem I started off with was, hey, I'm a pretty good person. I do good things. See, that's where most people are at in our world. And so they think, well, no, that's still not dealing with your deepest problem. And that is that you're a sinner, and that sin separates you from God. There's an avoidance of that for a variety of reasons. But so, that's why it's important to not just deal with the symptoms. We need to deal with the problem. And the only person that can do that's Christ and what he did for us on the cross. So yeah, and then the other statement that was connected with that is don't confuse actions with solutions.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're in a culture today that believes a lot in activity. Like if I'm busy,
Mhm.
then that must mean that I'm accomplishing something.
Right.
No, I've seen hamsters run around on spinning wheels in their cages, and they're not getting anything done. I think a lot of people are in that place, and when it comes to their walk with Christ, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Like they're busy and they're active, but that doesn't mean they have a relationship with God.
Right.
So yeah,
I get it now.
get it now.
I just had to hear it out loud.
I saw the
like
light
3 times
Well,
in
you
a
do
row.
have a light like directly above your head,
Yeah.
but literally in that moment, like another.
Light
yeah.
bulb came on.
Yeah. So
That was all I had.
that's all you got. Okay. Well, that
Yep.
wasn't too hard.
No, this was,
Okay.
for the most part, I think, easy for me to understand
Mm-hmm.
this sermon.
So this week we're dealing
And I
with
really liked this passage.
yes, and we'll be in Mark 7 again this week. We're talking about loving outcasts, people that have been maybe become the outcasts in our life. And, something that's really interesting to me, what we're seeing, so we're halfway through the book of Mark now.
Mm-hmm.
What we're seeing are themes that pop up over and over. Have you noticed that? Like we've had another
Mhm.
message or two that talks about people that are outcasts.
Yeah.
We've talked about the Pharisees and the whole inward
Mhm.
versus outward thing. It comes up over and over again. That should tell us something,
That it's important.
that it's important to Jesus. If
Mhm.
it keeps popping up again and again, then it's we better best pay attention.
Right.
We best pay attention. And so that's what we're going to talk about this week. So,
Cool.
Yeah.
So we
Yep.
still have a little ways to go in the Mark series.
We do. Yeah, we're going to do the series up through Easter. Our final series will be in
Okay.
Easter, so that's April the 9th, I believe. So we've
so
still
not as
got
long as I thought, but
we've,
still.
we've still got about a little less than 3 months
Yeah.
to go with it. But it's been a really good series.
Yeah.
I really enjoy the
I like
series
this
where
one
we
because it
go
covers
verse by
so
verse.
much.
Yeah, we've covered a lot.
Mhm.
And really the book of Mark is the shortest of the 4 gospels.
Yeah.
So there's actually more in some of the other books.
Mm-hmm.
And I've tried to touch on that from time to time. But it's been I've really enjoyed this series
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah, it's
So,
been good.
yeah.
All right. So next week we'll talk about
Loving outcasts.
loving outcasts.
Mhm.
Cool.
Yep. Mhm.
All right. Well, we'll see you next week.